A story was spread in one of the Western newspapers, now Politico magazine, claiming that Donald Trump convinced Viktor Orban and Hungary to change its stance regarding Ukraine's EU accession. As you know, just a few days ago, the Bloomberg news agency, which falsely presents itself as credible, wrote the same thing. Moreover, they also fabricated that Donald Trump called Viktor Orban and convinced him over the phone.
So this phone conversation naturally did not happen. What actually happened, that everyone knows, is that when there was the famous visit to the White House, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the President of the European Commission tried to convince the President of the United States to call the Hungarian Prime Minister and put pressure on him regarding Ukraine's European integration. These attempts were not successful, and the Ukrainian strategy, with which they want to advance in the European integration chief, has always looked like they didn't approach us with bilateral issues. It was not their primary concern to have a direct dialogue with us. But if there was some snag, they first called Brussels and asked Brussels to then put pressure on the Hungarian government to cease its resistance. If that didn't work, under the Biden administration, they called Washington to convey through their local governors to the Hungarian government that now it's over, everyone opposing will be put on a sanctions list, followed by economic, political, and other sanctions. And the Ukrainians thought that the time had come to test whether this strategy would also work under the new Trump administration. And clearly, it does not work, no matter how much the European mainstream press tries to say otherwise. They won this political struggle. They defeated their political opponents. Now the committee and Brussels, I think, are making a very big mistake. If it places itself in the role of Trump's political opponents. Trump already has very serious misgivings about international organizations. But if the European Union becomes not just a simple international organization about which Trump has misgivings, but if it becomes Trump's political opponent, then, naturally, Trump will want to defeat this political opponent as well. The European Commission in Brussels is very willing to take on the role of welcoming those who suffered political defeat in America. Then continue funding those programs that Trump no longer wants to finance. Trump can only see this as Brussels stepping into the role of the political opponent he battled and defeated in America. This is a complete misunderstanding of the situation. It is entirely clear to me that the Ukrainians obviously know exactly what and why they are bombing. They know precisely that this pipeline comes from, and they know exactly where this pipeline leads. They also know what this means for the Russian energy sector. Precisely. They know what percentage of Russian energy revenues is represented by the energy carriers transported through the Friendship oil pipeline. And they know precisely that this will not bring the Russian energy sector to its knees. And they also know exactly that this will harm Hungary and Slovakia. So putting together the pieces of this puzzle is not very difficult. This also fits into the Ukrainian negotiation strategy. You see, the Ukrainian government at any given time, and this is not a current peculiarity, this is Ukraine, has always been the case. They have always spoken the language of power and only understood the language of power. Well, everything the Ukrainians are doing in this context is understandable in terms of political pressure. What is truly outrageous to me is that the European Commission in this matter sides with a third country instead of a member state standing. And if there is an institution that I, as a member state, establish to promote my interests, and this institution not only fails to help, but also takes the side of a third country that threatens my fundamental national interests, then I must say that there is a fundamental problem with the functioning of the institution. And I will go even further, because the European Commission promised us the opposite at the beginning of the year when we agreed to the current sanctions package. A written declaration was made at that time, and this written declaration said that the European Commission considers the security of energy supply to the member states as a matter of European significance and will act accordingly. If this is a matter of European significance, then I ask, where is the committee that acts in such a case on behalf of a member state? I believe a political decision was made at the highest level. The President of the Commission, the leader of the People's Party, and President Zelensky that Ukraine must be brought into the European fold as soon as possible. Of course, President von der Leyen talks about the enlargement, and a target date of 2030 has been mentioned. But they always add that it could happen earlier, of course. Is that if, in fact, Ukraine develops at such a rate and reforms its judicial system, laws, and everything else so substantively, they might even be able to join tomorrow. This undermines the credibility of the entire enlargement process. So today, there are very few in Brussels or other member countries, including the Western Balkans, who say that this is truly merit-based process. I think that today, neither in Brussels nor among the candidates does anyone believe this.
Now here is the iconic photo I mentioned. There is some aftermath of this in Brussels, in the EU bodies, among the bureaucrats, that last Monday they had to go out and take such a position in the White House, in the room of the American president.
Yes, huge. So if someone looks at this photo, that I have thought a lot about what the purpose is of President Trump inviting these leaders to the White House, and then seating them in a chair that is 2 sizes lower and scolding them like kindergartners, after a misguided afternoon program. So what exactly is the purpose of all this? Because they themselves partly wanted it, or you say that you invited them, when in fact they pushed themselves there. And then later Rubio said, sure, it doesn't matter if they come. So yes, what is the purpose? Yes, but it often was. And then I realized that in American political communication, it was all about these images. I think what happened is that the American president invited these people and publicly humiliated them. That's all that happened. Now this of course requires significant follow-up for the European political elite, because somehow the European public needs to be explained that this is not what actually happened. And there were serious repercussions in that the Commission and the member states also worked very hard to explain the purpose of their visit, and they came up with various things about what kind of agreement was made about American security guarantees, which we now know turned out to be such no agreement was reached. More precisely, the agreement is currently being developed, and a decision was made that the sanctions are still in place.
Let's talk for a minute about a recent news item that appeared in the press yesterday, with the message that Hungary is suing the Union against the allocation of the frozen Russian assets to the Ukrainians, because we even regret this money from Ukraine and the country at war. What exactly is the essence here?
The essence of this is that with the European Peace Facility, decisions can only be made unanimously. And within the European Peace Facility, Hungary had previously fought for decisions through negotiated work that whatever support goes to Ukraine through the Peace Facility, whether military or non-military support through the Peace Facility, which is an Orwellian category called the Peace Facility, is actually used for purchasing weapons. So we want to promote peace through weapons. Therefore, the European Peace Facility means military support. Whether it is equipment capable of taking human life or not, it is military support, which is why we call it the Peace Facility in Brussels. But the decisions of the Peace Facility are made unanimously. We fought for the fact that, for the military support provided to Ukraine, we do not have to contribute. So, if a decision is made to increase the upper limit of the Peace Facility by so much and so much, which means contributions from member states, then we do not have to contribute to these payments. And the Council thus interpreted this decision that if we do not have to financially contribute to these decisions, then it means we do not need to vote on these matters either, meaning these decisions can be made bypassing Hungary, which goes against both the letter and spirit of the treaties.
A szerződések betűjével és szellemével is.